Big Jim Country Boy here today. Nice brand new t-shirt. You can get it at my merch store. Underneath in the description I'll leave a link. Okay, what I started doing here is I'm going to cut up some celery and some carrots and potatoes and onions, buffalo meat. I'm going to make a bison stew and then can it in my new canner. So let's see here, I'll cut you out, be back in a minute. Okay, I got 10 pounds of Canadian #1 russet potatoes. They look like new potatoes to me. And then a whole bunch of celery. And I got like 4 or 5 large onions chopped coarsely. And about 5 pounds of carrots chopped up. And then I have 6.5, 7 pounds of lean bison. These were $1.99 for 5-pound bag. Carrots were like $3.50 for 5-pound bag. The onions were on sale, 3 pounds for $1.99. And then we're going to season this meat up and brown it up a little bit. And let me get the pan hot. I'm going to use some good extra virgin olive oil here. I'm going to season this meat up in the pan because it's easier to do it all at once. I'm using some seasoning salt. Steakhouse seasoning or mozzarella steak seasoning is very similar to that. Use some garlic powder. Some onion powder. Give this a little bit of a stir. Make sure everybody gets a little bit of the seasoning. As the pan gets hot, I'm going to brown some of this up. Now, you don't want to put and fill the pan up. See, I got some, you got to do it in small batches because otherwise all the liquid, the water in the meat will come out and it'll boil. We don't want to do that. We want to sear it like a little brown crust on it if we can. And then when you're done, we're going to deglaze that pan for the broth for the beef stew that we're making. Venison, elk, buffalo. You can do this with any kind of wild game. I wouldn't really like rabbit, I wouldn't think. Rabbit is more like a white meat. At least the domestic rabbit I've eaten. Maybe wild rabbit would be good. You kind of don't want to keep stirring it too much neither. See how it's just gray when you flip it? I like to smash them down and just let that sit a couple minutes to get a crust on it. I turned it, but even see how you want to braise it up like this. But see how it's even getting water in there, even on high? Should do a little bit smaller batches, but I'm going to let the water cook off. It's all about flavor. You don't really have to cook this because we're going to can it and it's going to be in the canner and cook for a long time, and then the jars are going to stay hot forever. until they cool down, which will be like it being in a slow cooker until they cool down enough. But this is where we're going to get the broth from too. We're going to deglaze this pan. So we got that out of the pan. You can see the water cooking off in there. There's that first batch. And I just put it right back in the same pan. We're going to braise all this. I'm going to let that water cook off a little bit. Add a little more extra virgin olive oil. Don't worry about the smoke in the pan a little bit and it getting hot. It's going to cool right down now when we put meat in it again. Pack it down, let it crust up good. Frying up our last batch of meat. So there's all our braised bison we're going to use in our Texas stew. So we cubed up our bison and we braised it all, and then that'll go into our bison stew. A couple inches of water in this pot with some bay leaves. I try to use the bigger ones, the whole ones, because they got to come out. We're just going to make like a bay leaf tea to flavor the broth for the stew. You don't want to can your stew with the bay leaves in it. It'll overpower it. And it'll get too strong of a flavor setting in the jars. So there's our pan now simmering. We took our last bit of meat out, and then we're going to deglaze that with coffee, black coffee. Trick I've been doing for years to make a nice flavorful broth, and it doesn't taste like coffee. Yeah, know how we braise that meat to get that flavor? You can think what that tastes like when you add some salt and seasonings to it. That's exactly what black coffee tastes like if you season it with, say, garlic and onion powder, some salt and stuff like that. Maybe some celery salt or seasoning. Or seasoned salt. And that's going to make a nice rich broth. This is what we're going to add into the pot here, where we're making like a tea with some bay leaves. We're going to add all this together. We're doing that because we're going to can this, and we don't want to can the bay leaves in the jars with the food. It'll be overpowering. We're going to remove the bay leaves. So we're going to deglaze this and dump that in the pot. We're going to make a big pot of broth for this canned beef stew we're making. Beef flavored bouillon. I'm going to put 3 tablespoons. And then we'll give this a stir. Boil now. I'm going to turn it down to low and just let it simmer a little bit. We're going to pour our pan that we deglazed with the coffee into the pot of broth we're making. Look at that. So we're going to jar up our bison stew, and what I'm going to do is, what makes this Texas stew, you can make Texas beef stew, Texas steak stew, you can use venison, beef, elk, or whatever, but today we're using bison, and we're going to make a bison Texas stew. So one of the things we need are some of these freeze-dried peppers and some of these freeze-dried onions from our preps. You can check them out in our other prepper videos. I'll leave a link below if you're interested in where you can purchase these. And we're simply going to take a tablespoon of the onions and put it in a jar. A tablespoon of the peppers. We're going to add a handful of carrots, a quarter cup maybe if you want to measure it. Same with onions, fresh onions, some celery. You can put whatever you like, but this is the recipe I like. Potatoes. Some meat, some of that nice braised bison in there. Then some more carrots. A few more potatoes. Press it down real hard, but just a little bit. Okay. And then we're going to add a few more carrots and onions. Now I like gravy in mine. That's why the recipe goes. I always dump it in a bowl just to make it easier, but this is a teaspoon of cornstarch going on top to make that thicker for gravy. You could use flour, self-rising flour, whatever you have. I wouldn't use self-rising flour, but you could use anything else you might have, flour. So now that we got that in a jar, we're going to pour some broth in over the top that we made. I got a clean paper towel. We're going to take this, a clean paper towel that's wet with distilled vinegar, and we're going to clean this rim. I'm going to clean this ring here with vinegar too before I put the lid on. So I cleaned the lid with vinegar. We're going to put it on, and you want it on a towel like this. Of course, you have two hands. I'm holding the camera with one. I'm just going to push down firm and snug it up with my fingers. And then you have yourself a nice jar. Braised bison Texas stew. Texas bison stew. And then that's going to cook in the canner. It's going to take a couple hours before it cools down below cooking temperature too. So it's going to be like cooking it in a slow cooker. Or like in our other video where we made chuck wagon Texas steak in a Dutch oven. Well, this is the stew version. This is Texas chuck wagon braised bison steak stew. Okay, so we got our new canner here. We're gonna put this rack inside, and then we're gonna add 3 quarts of water. Is what this size canner calls for from the manufacturer. So an easy way to measure that is we're going to measure out 3 jars full, because they're quart jars. The other thing you can add to the water is a couple tablespoons of distilled white vinegar. That just keeps it from giving any hard water stains on the canner or on the jars. Otherwise you might get like a white chalky film on your jars from the hard water. Okay, so we got our water preheated. We're going to set our jars in there. Now this is like room temperature. It's not a hot pack. Now my canner says that I can put 7 in my, so that's what I have. We're going to place our lid on, turn it and lock it. So I have all my stuff in my canner here, my 7 jars, and I have the heat on high, and I have a lot of adjustment later to turn it down. But we're going to leave it on high until we start to get some steam venting from here. And then when we get close to our pressure here, once it starts to move, we're going to dial it down on this temperature on the stove. We're going to turn down. We're going to be shooting for 14 to 15 psi there on the gauge for 75 minutes. Alright. Now this is not necessarily the way you're supposed to do it. You're supposed to boil the stew first, but I'm not, for my preferences. I mean, they say boil it for 5 minutes first, but it's going to boil for 75 minutes in a jar. I'm sure it'll be fine. Here's all the stew we made. It's been out of the canner and sat here and cooled on a towel for 24 hours. Looks pretty good. Be nice to enjoy some of this. Maybe later I might open one up for lunch and eat it. Alright. Hey everybody, Big Jim Country Boy here. Check out my new t-shirt. Displays my big giant hot dog I cooked over a campfire. Isn't that beautiful? I got a bunch of other shirts you can check out. Coffee mugs and sweatshirts, hoodies and everything. I'll leave a link down in the description to the merch store. Until next time, Big Jim Country Boy, over and out.